People say today, have mercy, have mercy.
Hey, it's the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling, a Tony James podcast. And on this episode, we are going to talk about length of title reign, comparing traditional versus modern. Is it worth it? Is it worth the time to have a champion hold the belt longer than normal? And what is normal and how do we define that? We're going to talk about traditional, modern, the current product, and we're going to dive a little bit into independent wrestling. I hope you stick around. We're going to have a good time. What do you say we get to work? This is the Good, the Bad, and the Wrestling, a Tony James podcast. And as always, the bells of justice are ringing. And today, I've been watching some things in the wrestling news, they're still talking about Roman Reigns and him breaking Hogan's first title run record. And they're talking about already leaking stuff on how they're going to have Gunther here lose the title. His IC title, and some other great things. And this last podcast, I hope you checked it out. It talked about title reign days and how everybody's getting the days wrong. They're not doing their wrestling math, and they're not giving the old guys enough credit for the amount of time they put in. So check that out. But before we get into this little ditty, I want to thank my sponsors, Jose Sanchez Boots, Three Brothers RC, Southpaw Boxing Club, and I want to thank Sinbad's Gym. They're the company that always makes sure that I have the bells of justice ringing when I get into the ring, and I want to thank them for that. So what I'd like to talk about today, briefly, and kind of conjure up an argument, I've been scouring the YouTube trying to figure out what's going on, and not a lot going on in the wrestling world other than, it depends on, you may think a lot's going on. I still feel that the old traditional style seems to get a lot more attention right now than the current product. But with that being said, how long should a champion hold a belt? Right? So that's one of the arguments. Should Roman Reigns be dropping it? How long should Gunther be holding it? I think in today's time period, it is difficult to keep the attention of the fans. Is the needle moving? Are people coming to the product depending on who your champ is? And why are you trying to establish your champ, right? So if you go back in the day, guys like Harley Race, Ric Flair, those guys, Lou Thez, right? Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, Bruno Sammartino, those guys were built at the time. Everything was legit, right? There was no letting people in to see what was going on. So in order to build up your product, your following, and to make money, you needed somebody who was legit. And if someone was getting beat every 3 months, it really doesn't, bring eyes to your product. And you also have to remember this, pro wrestling, you had, when you compare it to other sports and boxing and such, you had Rocky Marciano, who was undefeated. You had the Yankees, who had how many championships? The Boston Celtics as well. You had certain, before the Super Bowl era, you had the Browns, Colts, Giants, Packers, and then the Super Bowl era, the Packers continued on for the first couple, and then you just have your certain teams that dominate. And domination, once again, at some point is a good way to bring eyes to the table, and then you're always rooting for those underdogs to try to dethrone them. And then at some point you realize we are past that time. It's time to move on. We need somebody else. In Bruno's case, he was the man. He had one of the longest reigns. Bruno, of course, was not a company guy, meaning he didn't book his own matches. He was told what to do, and he did it. whereas you had Vern Gagne, who was close to capturing the same length that Bruno Sammartino had when it came to title reign. He owned the company. He booked the company. He was always the champ no matter what. No matter what happened, even when he retired, he never lost. So you have little differences when you're looking at AWA, WWF. In the NWA, you had a committee that determined what was going on, and Harley Race was a legitimate champ, right? If you look back at the NWA's champions, they held it for a while, and when there was a short reign, the next guy followed up with a longer reign. So there was a method behind the madness, so to speak, and it kind of dissipated as it went. Sammartino's first reign was brought to a halt by Koloff. A quick turnaround to Morales. Morales kept it for a while, dropped it to Stasiak, 9 days, I think. Bruno picks it back up. And then finally, right, you get superstar Billy Graham, who held it for a year. And this is where the Bob Backlund scenario comes into play, where it was already predetermined we're shoving Backlund down everybody's throat. I think this was the first incident in wrestling where a champion was pre-made before being made, whereas your other guys made themselves, became champ. I still to this day feel that Superstar, when he beat Sammartino, should have kept the belt right on up into the 80s period, where they could have turned Superstar face. The Sheik could have beat him, and you still could have had the run of Hulkamania, or you could have flipped him back the heel and had the Hogan Superstar piece. Either way, I just feel Backlund coming in, and I know I was just watching something the other day on possibles who could have been champion. And then, of course, they denounce anything Hogan says about that night, and that everything Backlund said about that night is correct. Once again, it's just really cool to hate Hogan right now and to believe Backlund. But if you go back and watch a lot of their interactions on tape, on where you actually get to see their interaction, Backlund, you can tell, wasn't a fan of Hogan. He didn't want anything to do with Hogan. He still thought he was going to get the belt back. So he even cut, like, when you go back and watch old Spectrum 80 or mid 84 matches where he's still on the cards. I believe Backlund was actually on the 85 card on the War to Settle the Score. He's cutting promos. He grabs the mic before he leaves the ring and says, I want the title. Anything I can do, I'm coming back for it. Even after Hogan had won the title. So, you know, a lot of that stuff is an interesting piece. But I say that to say this. Back then, it meant something to hold the title for a long period of time, and it helped build things up, and people got behind a champ. I would say, of course, once Hogan finally left the WWF after his initial reign, then they only became one-offs, one-year type reigns. And then there was a point in time in the WWF where everybody and their brother got to touch the belt. The newest guy coming up, make him champ. He holds it for a couple months. He loses it. Next guy coming up, gets the belt, loses it. And all you got to do is look up the title reign history and see at some point it's just a flip-flop of madness of who's holding the belt and how many times, and it just became watered down, and it didn't mean anything. So now you're shifting gears back into modern-day wrestling. NWA as well. I feel that Barry Windham, when he finally won the title, it was probably a little too late. And then you had guys like Flair who just every time he came back to the company, they put the title on him. It was rare, really, in my opinion, to see Hogan keep the belt for a year before he dropped it to Sting, because that belt was just kind of flip-flopping. And then, and that was, between Hogan, Savage, all that pre-NWO stuff, it was flipping around. And then after the fact, it kind of did a little bit of the same. I don't know if, and this could be the argument, is it the company controlling the attention span of the fans, or is it the fans controlling the length of the title reign to the company? So if I'm a company and I want them to want a long reigning champion, I have to condition them to see that. Just like if you're doing short matches and you want to build up your match set and you want 20, 30-minute matches, you have to build the crowd up to that. You just can't give it to them and expect them to sit through it. Or is it the fans going, we don't want that, right? we don't want we want to see the belt being dropped all the time. I don't know if they like that or not. Another example is Steamboat Flair in the late '80s. In Chicago, he wins the title, and it was almost like, and Ronnie Garvin's another example. Someone wins the belt and drops it back to Flair just to build Flair back up because they're starting to get maybe tired of Flair having the belt, but we put it back on him. The one scenario when it comes to title reigns I think works, and I would use this with Gunther myself. I think you use the secondary belt as a way to build someone up. Given Gunther this long title reign, I would keep it on him and I'd keep moving him ahead until I feel he was ready for the heavyweight title reign. And then I'd have him get beat and then establish himself as a contender. I call this the Magnum TA theory. If you remember, Magnum TA himself was being groomed to be the NWA heavyweight champion. But before they did that, when they brought him in from Mid-South, they put a rocket on him. He's beating guys in 15 seconds. He had a feud with Wahoo for the U.S. title. He then feuded with Tully Blanchard and won the U.S. title back. And then he got into his program with Nikita Koloff. And he loses. Like, they build him up, best of 7, all this feuding. And then Nikita wins. And then Magnum TA cannot get the belt back from Nikita. And then what they do is they put Magnum TA in a storyline with gorgeous Jimmy Garvin to kind of distract you from the Nikita thing, to segue as a transition to get Magnum back on the realm to chase Ric Flair, which they were going to put the belt on him and probably keep it on him for a long time. And then, of course, you know what happens to Magnum TA. I think you take the same theory, the same philosophy, and you apply it to the current Intercontinental Champion, Gunther, and you have him do the same thing. He's got this belt. I think someone beats him. He can't win it back. You do a transition match or a feud, and then you put him in line to go after the belt. Personally, these guys back in the day who held the belt for a very long time, defended it for a very long time, had multiple matches, as I've proven in the previous podcast. Roman Reigns doesn't do that now. I'm not knocking him. It's a different day and age. You have to, just as Conan said, it's a different age. It's modern day. It's modern wrestling. So they are trying to, once again, morph modern and traditional by having a long title reign. I personally think, and this is just me, once Roman Reigns beats Hogan's first title run record and they can finally put a modern guy in the top 5, then he will lose, and then they will establish somebody else, and you probably won't see another long title reign for a while. Same thing with Charlotte Flair. She was on the roll to have title reigns, not the longest title reign, but she was racking them up, and then they backed her off. I think it's a big mistake. I would have given her a long title reign and then just had her continue to win the belts, because I think she's worthy of it, and people want to see that, and it draws money. So those are the types of things I'm wondering what your thoughts out there. What are your thoughts out there on that? I put some pictures as I'm talking. They're in random order, but there's just things to get you thinking about who was champ, who possibly could have been champ. Like, I got the Road Warriors on there. I think the AWA dropped the ball with the Road Warriors. You build these guys up as indestructible, but the problem is on a long title reign, and they did this with Bruno, right? WWF did this with Bruno. He was just a hard guy to beat, and therefore he kept the title for the long time. When you have guys like the Road Warriors and you put the titles on them, it's hard to get them off without hurting them, right? So you got to be careful on when and how you put a title on a guy and how you take it off. Now, you're probably saying, hey, Tony, why aren't you talking AEW? Why aren't you talking NWA, MLW? MLW had it right. They had a long Hammerstone. He held the belt for a long time, and then they finally brought a guy in and had a program, and he dropped it. I think that's great. I like that style. NWA, I liked what they're doing with the NWA title, with all their champions, and Aldis into Murdoch. I know Cody Rhodes beat him and then dropped it right back. That was an interesting situation. And then Murdoch had it for a little bit, and then Cyrus had it, which was cool. And now you've got EC3 holding the title, and I hope they leave it on him for a while so he can show what he can do. AEW, I guess MJF's held it for a while. It just does. Nobody's going to the product to see it. And I said this before in a previous episode I had a while back. When you're the champ, and I think it's great that he went back to his roots, back to the company where MJF worked, and he started wrestling with guys. But he put himself in the ring with one of their up and coming guys who only in AEW would get a chance because of who AEW brings in when you look at the guys they bring in. And the kid, I don't even know if he was 200 pounds, takes MJF to the limit. And MJF wrestles him like it's one of those, it's like it's a Steamboat Flair, Hogan Andre match, like unbeatable. And then to me, that takes away from the title. If you're going to Indies and you're defending the title against Indies who people don't know, and they're taking you to the limit, and then you get back on TV like it didn't happen, but people know, they know what happens because it's the modern day of social media and internet and access to matches. I don't see AEW even being a contender because I don't think they have a champ or they don't have a concept behind a champ to move the product. So once again, the argument is length of title reign a good thing in today's era? I think it was great in the traditional era and even the pre-golden era, as they call it, because it meant something when a champ came in and it meant something when they lost it. When you flip it all the time, that's why you got secondary belts. You bring in different belts. That's why you have that. But your champ, depending on how you want to establish them, so goes the champ, so goes the company, right? So I think moving into today, I would like to think that the reason Roman Reigns is getting this long run is because he's putting butts in the seats and everything. But when the curtain's drawn back and now people know, and the guys he's fighting and feuding with they're shaking hands after the fact and posting pictures, it just takes the edge off. So to me, he could have the belt for 8 years and he could beat Bruno's record. I don't care. Bruno's record is legitimate. Bruno's record because of the day and age. Even if someone beats it by number, and it'll probably happen in the future, great. I still don't consider it. Hogan's 4-year run, even though I'm not a fan of Backlund and I thought that was a big mistake, it still is what it is. He defended his title, even though you had that Antonio Inoki drop in Japan they don't recognize. You're never going to be able to duplicate that. So as Conan always says, you got to move on and live in the now. So the now is Roman Reigns is getting close. Sometime next year, he'll break the record. WWE will then be able to say, we have a modern guy in there. So 20 years from now, it just doesn't have guys from the 60s, 70s, and 80s who are in your top title reigns. They finally got someone in there that's somewhat modern. I get it. That's why I think they're having a long title reign. On the other hand, Gunther, the IC champion, to me, that is a great storyline and that is legit. Like I said in MLW, what they were doing with Hammerstone, I thought that was a great idea. Now, transitioning into independent wrestling, that's a whole nother story. I don't know if any of you keep up on indie scene. Indie scene has had a bit of a resurgence lately. Check it out on social media. It's great. The Illinois promotions are looking really good. Ohio, a couple of the biggies look to be coming back. Not that they left, but there are a couple big promotions in Ohio. War being one of them that I always look to see what goes on, and it looks like they're promoting some stuff again, heavier than normal. There just seems to be a resurgence overall in different areas across the nation when it comes to independent wrestling, which is good. My argument with independent wrestling has always been there's no in between. It's either really good or it's either really bad because of the talent and how you put the talent in and how you promote the talent. If you're just putting guys in the ring and you don't care if they're trained, they don't know what they're doing, you could sustain if you got a place to put a ring, 15 people every weekend. That's great. You're living your dream. I think to help guys get to the next level, you have to have guys, you have to bring in guys, and you have to have people that are worthy to go see. So, title reign aspect, I always go, when I check out a promotion, I go to see who their champs are. And I like to see how many times a belt gets flipped. When I go to an indie show, I'm not looking for a title to be dropped unless these guys have been clashing and I want to see if he can defend his title. That's the thing that happened back in the day. The champ, you wanted to see the champ defend his title. I don't know if that's so much the same now. It's about streaks and how many title reigns rather than the belt itself. When you go to a WWE, you go to an experience. You don't go to see a particular wrestler, so to speak. More so, you go to have a WWE experience. And I talked about this recently as well. Back in the day, I wanted to go see Andre. I wanted to go see Hogan. I wanted to see Rick Steamboat, Don Morocco, Paul Orndorff. I just happened to be going to a WWF show. Same thing with the NWA. When I went to those, I wanted to see certain guys. Things got switched, and now it's a brand more than it is the people. If those don't work, I got 300 more people at the training center. We'll find somebody to put in those tights. Indies, this is the beauty about indie, the grassroots movement. I think it's a challenge, and I challenge any indie promotion to put in a very good program. Start with a year. This is my guy. He wins the title. I'm going to use the Madison Square Garden method, and I'm going to create programs that have blow-off matches, and I'm going to see how long I can make money with this guy to the point where he's not winning, dropping, but he's actually bringing people in, and you're feeding him opponents. You're throwing in tags here and there. You're feeding him opponents, or her, if you're promoting, if you have a female champion. Feed the champ opponents, whether they're heel or face, feed them opponents. Let them show their worth and see. And then if it isn't working, you can just flip it, get a new champ, and do it again. I think that the old school method is the best method. I enjoy seeing an indie champ that's held the belt for a while because they're getting over and they're putting butts in the seats, not just because. You can brag, I'm the longest reigning champ, look at me. But, well, how many matches have you had? And what type of matches? And what's the attendance like? And are people buying your merch? Those types of things. They're different watermarks that we look at nowadays because, once again, we are in modern wrestling, right? So are the likes, the followers on all the social media platforms legit? Are they pre-made? Are they your family as pertains to really fans? That's a good way to gauge, is your champion and overall is your talent, are your wrestlers really getting over? And if so, do you keep that method? Yes. If not, you got to move on, bring guys in and reset and keep moving. There's a lot of good stuff out there today. And like I said, I do believe the independent scene is having a resurgence. But getting back to, we'll put a button on this for you. Is it good to have a long reigning champion? And it doesn't have to be heavyweight. I think, like I said, whether it's tags, whether it's the heavyweight, your secondary belts, modern day, right now in the big companies, is it working? I believe it is in some companies. I believe NWA's got something going on. I do believe MLW is working well. Not a fan on AEW and what they're doing. WWE, once again, are the ratings moving? Everybody's looking to Cody Rhodes. Is he the guy? But you got this great IC champ right there. I would like to see Gunther and Cody Rhodes feud for the title. That would put butts in the seats, in my opinion. Are there people other than those guys that can take the belt and run with it and have? I want to see a true, legitimate, sincere, long title run, not a forced title run. And I feel the current WWE titles are being forced, except for the IC title. I think that's a legitimate, well-established champion that is holding on to the belt. And I know there's rumors out there they're already figuring out how to take it from him. Don't tell us that. Let us just enjoy it and watch it happen. We need to pull the curtain not back to let you see, but we need to pull it back so you can't see. We should need to go back to the time where you don't get to know what's going on. You want to know what's going on? Come to the matches and figure it out. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, hey, support your local indie wrestling. There's some really good stuff out there. Don't let the guys that aren't that great, don't let the guys that hurt the locker room, don't let the guys, and you know who I'm talking about, don't let them hurt the nuance, the culture of indie wrestling. The fans may not always know that, but well, let me rephrase that. They probably do know what's going on, because the same guys that aren't getting it done in the ring and the same guys that are creating a problem are the same guys that after their match, they like to go in and out of the curtain and they like to mingle with the fans. It's one thing to go in and out of the curtain because you got to get to the restroom down the street, or you got to do some other things, or you're doing multitasking. I'm talking about the guys that have to go talk to the fans and try to get over that way instead of getting over in the ring. After the event is over, when we're tearing the ring down, they're over panhandling, doing the inside stuff, just like the rag sheets do. So you know what I'm talking about. It's about time indie wrestling takes it back and you give quality over quantity. And let's see if we can't get some really cool title runs. Hey, that's my 2 cents. I want to thank my sponsors. Once again, Jose Sanchez Boots. I love their boots. I use them. I wear them. Check them out. Southpaw Boxing Club. I'm telling you, my main man, Eric the Masher Asher, is getting you in shape, and he'll keep you in shape. Three Brothers RC, the only place, I'm telling you, worldwide, the only place to get your RC products. And then, of course, we have Sinbad's Gym. I want to thank them once again for making sure my bells are customized, the bells of justice, and they always make sure that everything's tight and out of sight. With that being said, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. God is good, and if you're on a particular platform, let's say Spotify or Facebook, check us out, follow us, like us. We're new on Facebook. I always add extra matches at the end of my podcasts on certain platforms to try to generate you to like it, share it, create it. Let's get these things going, and don't be afraid to leave a message, drop a line, and tell me what you're thinking about wrestling. Hey, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. God is good, and I will see you at the matches.